Hey there, this is Fritz Westover with Virtual Viticulture Academy and the Vineyard Underground podcast. And I have a question today from the field that I'm going to share with you from a grower in Colorado. And this grower specifically asked a question about the grass that they're growing in their vineyard. And it's coming into the winter. So this grower is asking, to mow or not to mow? Is it better to leave the grasses in and around the vineyard long, in other words, long grass throughout the winter, like 12 inches or longer, or is it better to mow it like it's a putting green in a golf course, right? There's sub-zero temperatures expected this winter. So here's what I would say to this grower in particular. If you're growing grapes in a site where late spring freeze could be an issue. So in other words, if your buds are coming out in the spring and you typically get freeze events that cause death to your young shoots and that can cause crop losses, then you want to make sure you're not obstructing airflow. So this is really important, again, in the spring, before or just after bud burst. So what I would say is if you have long grass, and if it's 12 inches long or 24 inches long in the case of some cover crops, what a lot of growers like to do is before they see a freeze or frost event coming, whether it's before bud burst or just at bud burst, or maybe just after bud burst, they'll go through and shred, crimp, or mow that cover so that the airflow is not restricted, especially if you're on a slope and especially if you're trying to move air that's dense and cold to a lower part of your property. So if you put your vineyard on the right part of the property, it should not be in the lowest spot. It should be up on a hillside or a slope, but you don't want to block that cold air from flowing to the low area and draining to that low area so that you don't have as low a temperature in the vineyard. That will keep the temperature higher around your vines. Now, if you don't have that as an issue, you may decide to leave the cover or take it down if you see a freeze event coming, or you may just default to mowing it down or disking it or crimping it just before bud burst. Now, during the winter, this shouldn't be an issue because if you're growing grapes in Colorado, you're probably growing grapes that are cold hardy down to 0 or below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So it shouldn't be an issue in terms of trunk death or bud death in the vines themselves. Now, if you were in an area where you had an issue with rodents or voles or field mice or something that was girdling your grapevines, having a lot of grass gives a cover and a refuge for those voles or other mammals that could be damaging your vines by girdling, a place to stay and take refuge from predators, for example. So if that's the case in your vineyard, you might not want to leave a long cover. Now, I probably wouldn't mow it down to a golf course tee. That's a little bit exaggerated. We all want our vineyards to look good, but they don't need to look like a golf course. We're not growing aesthetics, we're growing grapes and we're farming. So my advice to you in Colorado would be to let the grass stay long. This is going to hopefully shade the ground a little bit and provide a little bit of competition with any winter weeds or broadleaf weeds that might come up in the vineyard. And it's hopefully going to insulate the ground a little bit as well. But besides that, I would say no need to cut the grass short. I don't see any real advantage to it unless, of course, again, you have some voles or some mammals that are an issue in the vineyard. And I would take note to any frost events or late spring freeze events in the spring and just make sure you have everything mowed down and cut to increase and improve your airflow for those cold air events that happen in the spring. But that's really it. I hope that's helpful. If you have any other questions, or if you just want to find some great resources on grape growing, go to virtualviticultureacademy.com or just listen in on the Vineyard Underground podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks, and hope to see you at the next one.